Coming up, we should all have the freedom to learn and experience life in our own unique way, due in part to an innate feeling inside of me and due to the way I feel. I was not even given an opportunity to express myself and excel educationally. I agree with the philosophy of unschooling and self-directed education, where a student is able to explore the curious nature and playfulness through sociability and information access digitally or otherwise, instead of a system of imposed schooling through reward and punishment. I can remember days as a child when my dad would come home from his day job as a civilian worker at Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama, and then going out to go puckwooding, that is hauling lumber for the city folks, after work. After having gotten up at 4 a.m. in the morning so that he could drop off one of my brothers, Kenneth, at his plant job at, I think it was a mayonnaise company in Montgomery. My other brother, Curtis, to his job where he would repair air conditioners, old stoves, washers, and dryers from a then black-owned second-hand store, then dropped me off at Trenton State Community College. I never imagined I would find myself in a similar situation as my dad many years later. I had started working a second job, not my first time doing so, but at this stage in my life, around the age when my dad was putwooding, it hit me. I was repeating a cycle to ensure we, my husband and I, would hold on to our home we had built about 6 years before on land my parents had worked so hard to keep and pass down to me someday. Each evening, as I dragged myself to bed with tears in my eyes from the knees and shoulder and joint pain from a long day's work before and the sorrow of being black in America, even though we have more opportunities than most countries, was too a heavy burden, hard burden to bear. I would often pray the sincerest prayer for God to allow me to rest with Him for all eternity and never let me go at night. But to my dismay, each morning I woke up to the same knowing that the sparing of my life was not for me but the glory to our Father, who said it in the kindest way as only He can within my heart, Buffy, you still have work to do. And with that, I live to see and work another day. I realized that I had been living in a constant tense state until one day, someone showed me a Tyler Perry play. Then they had purchased bootleg off the street. I laughed and I cried and I laughed and I thought, laughter to heal the soul. No thinking required. Thank you, Tyler, for giving us the comic relief we all needed. People fishing beside the roads for Saturday evening dinner, keeping their cane poles in the back seat of their cars with the back window down, just enough to let the pole to wobble and bounce and wave in the wind as they search for the perfect fishing hole underneath a country rickety wooden bridge, with cups of baits dug up from the muddy yard after a hard rain, and a 5-gallon bucket to keep the catch of the day in the floorboard of the back seat. Those were the days. Each neighborhood had its own little village, as I like to call them. There were a sea of different homes, some trailers, some homes with a room where a bathroom should be, like my grandma's. They usually consisted of an area that one relative had purchased and then included all of their sisters and brothers in on the deal, and each child would get their plot of land. So each immediate group lived near their immediate clan or family. And usually there was a community store that had everything from oil to put in your car to honey buns to penny candy. Penny bags of candy were my favorite. I would bum $1 or $2 off my parents and get on the bus the next morning still beaming because I had at least 75 pieces left to enjoy. Back then, the bus drivers knew your parents because schools would employ local people. Most of them had permission to get a switch and threatened to spank your butt if you dared to talk back or start trouble on the bus. They would politely put the bus in park upon your arrival home, telling your parents so you could get a second tongue thrashing or spanking when you got home. On the weekends, kids, young adults, cousins, and neighbors would gather together and play various games like dominoes, spades, or even the dozens, joking on each other. It was also most a custom greeting and spiraling of wits. The dozens was fun to watch and even more exciting to participate in. It seemed because they were always ready and fully loaded the insults that weren't meant to level the playing field or display who was the alpha dog of the day. Who was the man? It was fun. All of this would be followed by a friendly game of basketball, softball, or baseball, depending on the season we were in. Living in my parents' house back then was fun and interesting. I had been rooming with my paternal grandmother since the age of about 2. So my parents say my brother shared a room and my mom and dad's room was in the room where the dining room was supposed to be. My parents would host house parties where I would have the privilege of playing DJ and switching out Brooke Benton, Sam Cooke, Marvin Gaye, and Al Green 8 tracks. I loved when their friends came to the house. They had one friend that looked so much like Smokey Robinson, I would go into a deep haze every time he came around. Later, I would find myself as a preteen or teenager in the middle of the floor listening to my boombox and making mixtapes on the radio, waiting on the top 10 or 20 on the charts or the midnight grooves on Hot 105.7. You had to time it just right so you could press record just after the announcer finished setting up the song and press pause button just before the commercials. It was a tricky game of cat and mouse, but I had perfected my mixing skills during the house parties and at home, and my brother, Curtis, who ended up being one of the best DJs in town, especially when it came to blues music, until he became a deacon at the church, and then it was back to the radio. Most of my parents' friends were truth tellers. I don't know if it was who they truly were, or if it was the fact that they had just left the bootlegger's house. Either way, we all need truth tellers in our life. Either way, we all need truth tellers in your life. I have a mastermind group to help keep me grounded. But back in the day, truth tellers were everywhere. My personal choice of natural connections was truth teller was my husband, because living up to the expectation of what others wanted for me almost cost me my life. I preferred to live up to truth, not expectations. That is why I love Tyler Perry. He taught us, and by us, I mean blacks, how to laugh again. Laugh at ourselves, laugh at our differences and our similarities. As a native tribe with the same root values, at the same time we needed it most. The country feels so divided from my small perspective of the world. I find myself feeling knots in my stomach when I would see a Confederate flag or a police officer. The preoccupation with what if they just decided today is my day to be harassed. Don't get me wrong, I know I have not done anything wrong, but my anxiety level was going up each time I see an officer in uniform, and that saddens me for the state of the world and the future. When I was younger, my dad took me to a Democratic meeting, which I am sure contributed to my Black Power attitude as a kid, and I was involved in the NAACP as a youth. All of which gave me a deep appreciation for my family, my community, and my nation. In small towns, we would often hear rumors, true or not, of mysterious deaths, hangings of African American males in Alabama, Mississippi, and all around the South. But it is kept hush hush because of the preoccupation of hate that causes the lower middle class woman like me to fear being caught in the streets alone in our own neighborhoods. The neighborhood I grew up in, fought for, worked to make positive changes in, but still fear when my children or I go out at night, what will happen? I believe in the humanity and kindness of people. Yes, there are those who have done unspeakable evil things in this life, but I still insist that love flows throughout the universe, and I try to remind myself of it every day. Love is a powerful equalizer that brings with it peace and light, and with that, I live with the hope of a better day. Because of my exposure to all these efforts, although I consider myself a shy introvert, I am very vocal and very visible in my community and action, or so I tell myself.